Welcome to Cinema Recaps. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie starts in San Francisco FBI department building. Two police detectives, namely Matthew and Frank, using their ID as police officers, sneak into the building. They break into a restricted room to steal data from one of the computers. They are searching someone with specific bone marrow for some reason known to them only. After searching a few minutes, they finally find a man named Peter J. McCabe. But it turns out, he is a hardcore criminal with murder, manslaughter, and assault charges. Peter is currently locked in solitary confinement for breaking an inmate's leg at Pelican Bay State Prison. Even though Peter's formal education just up to grade 9, he has over 150 IQ. The man has escaped twice and killed 2 policemen in the process. The last time, he burned them alive and used their IDs to dodge the police. Peter is not just a fugitive, he is an extremely intelligent sociopath who enjoys playing with people's minds. The next day, Detective Frank and the police captain reach the prison to meet Peter. The reason for their visit is unclear, until Frank finally meets Peter and tells him that his 8-year-old son Max is suffering from leukemia. Max urgently needs a bone marrow transplant. But according to all the databases, the only person that matches is Peter. Regardless of finding out that he can save a kid's life, Peter refused to get involved. He exploits Frank and compels him plead before telling him that he will think if he can help. Frank tries to persuade him by asserting that his son is Peter's only way of redemption. But instead of showing any interest in redemption, Peter just wants fun and freedom. Frank returns despaired and goes to the hospital to see his son Max, where he is met with more bad news as the doctor informs that without a bone marrow transplant, Max has only a few more weeks to live. She even asks him to prepare himself for the worst. Here, it turns out that Max is unaware of the situation. Instead, he is excited about a book that his father gifted him and has no worries about what's going on. But upon sensing his father's discomfort, the kid figures out that something was wrong. Thus, he inquires if he was going to die. Frank informs him about cancer, but lies that he has found a donor willing to contribute. The kid becomes joyous and comforts his dad that even if the transplant fails, I know you tried your best. In the meantime, Frank receives a call from the prison. Peter has finally agreed for the transplant but wants to meet Max before making confirmation. Though skeptical, Frank assures him of bringing the kid next day. In the next scene, Peter and Max are seen together. Peter asks the kid to call him Uncle Pete and talks to him for a while, before finally promising to be his donor. In excitement, Max runs to his father, but the Peter puts a bunch of demands before going for a written consent, which include getting out of solitary confinement and be able to socialize with other inmates, his smoking privileges restored, and that he should be allowed to use the prison library, which has a computer also, with internet access. At first, the prison warden does not seem cooperative enough to grant such permissions, but after pulling some strings, Frank manages to make him agree. Afterwards, Peter is seen being provided a cigarette, prompting him sign the consent. Soon as the police leave, and Peter is alone, he dislocates his thumb with the help of a shoelace. This act is the first step towards his perfect escape plan. On the other side, Max is concerned about receiving bone marrow from a hardcore criminal. However, his father assures him that Peter's sins have nothing to do with his body. Just like receiving blood from an old person doesn't make him old. Meanwhile, Peter continues his preparations in the prison and approaches a secret drug supplier. At first, he refuses to do business with him, but after Peter threatens him, agrees to cooperate. Peter wants an ampoule of Narcan, an anti-drug used for emergency treatment of known or suspected opioid overdose. Supplier asks purpose of the drug, and Peter tells him that everyone will know at the right time. As the supplier explores for acquiring the drug, Peter uses library computer to acquire and study map of the hospital he is going to donate bone marrow. For this, he tricks the guards by pretending to play chess. As he is good at it, they don't suspect him. Meanwhile, police prepares the hospital for Peter's arrival, ensuring complete safety, which includes several helicopters flying above and heavy contingent to escort Peter to hospital and back. Just a night before the big day, while giving Peter his daily dose of medicine, the supplier hands him over 2 cups, one containing the drug he has demanded. Once alone in his cell, Peter ties the ampoule to a thread and ties the other end of the thread to his teeth, and then swallows the ampoule to pull it out when needed. Thereafter, finally comes the day of the transplant. An army of guards in several vehicles bring Peter to the hospital. He is taken there in restraints, which have to be removed to place him on the bed. But the guards swiftly tie his hands again with the bed, not knowing that his thumb was dislocated. Soon as the doctor sedates him to initiate the transplant, Peter drinks the contents of the ampoule. This anti-drug prevents him from passing out, leaving the doctors shocked. However, by the time doctors realize his plans, Peter has already pulled his hand out. Then he swiftly knocks out the doctors and guards by attacking them with a gas pipe and run away. Frank, who had been watching the commotion from the upper floor, rushes to help them. He then turns his attention towards the fugitive. To disguise himself as a doctor, Peter slides down the laundry chute and wears a doctor's coat. Despite his legs tied together with a chain and a gunshot wound in his leg, Peter does not seem affected. He approaches a room with laser guns and makes the doctor break his chains by threatening him. Afterwards, he rushes to the emergency room to get a shot of morphine for the pain, but Frank reaches him. Peter holds a scalpel to Max's Dr. Samantha's throat to force Frank to abstain. Meanwhile, a detective tries to shoot Peter, but Samantha tells that if Peter dies, the bone marrow would not be possible, and Max will never get the transplant. In a flash, a policeman named Wilson appears from behind a curtain. Pointing gun at Peter, he asks him to let the doctor go. Panicked, Frank hands over his gun to Peter to enable him to defend himself. This act will surely cost him his police job, but at the moment all he cares about is his son's life. While Wilson and Peter are negotiating, Frank comes in between them, refusing to let Peter get hurt. In an ensuing shootout, Peter kills a policeman and critically injures Wilson and runs away. Soon after, the captain arrives with his team. He berates Frank for sacrificing people like this to save his son. They arrest Frank for his erratic behavior to send him to the police station. But as they bring him outside the hospital, he pushes the policeman into a crowd of reporters and runs away. Back inside the hospital, Max starts bleeding from his nose, and Dr. Samantha is tending to him. Police officer Matthew is also there, but Peters attacks him and knocks him out. He demands Samantha to tell him where the cyclopropane is kept. He also assures Max that he will send Samantha back as soon as she helps him find propane. Elsewhere, Frank swiftly drives a bike into the hospital and starts looking for Peter. He goes to Max and makes sure the kid is okay. Then he helps Matthew. Meanwhile, Max reveals that the fugitive was talking about propane, which gives Frank an idea of where they might have gone. Frank requests Matthew to take care of Max and runs outside. Elsewhere, Peter makes Samantha put 2 tanks of propane into a bag and asks her electrical room's direction. Peter plans to blow up the room as a distraction tactic for his safe escape. But Samantha takes him by surprise and hurts him by beating him with a cylinder and run away. In the hallways, she meets Frank, who begs her not to report the police as they will kill Peter. Samantha agrees and goes to tend to Max. Frank finds Peter outside the room, but Peter has an upper hand because he knows that Frank cannot kill him. He blows up the room and runs away. The explosion causes entire electrical system of the hospital collapse, including lights and ventilators. Therefore, Matthew starts moving Max to old building of the hospital joined to the new one through a bridge. While following them, Frank notices Peter is also moving towards the old building. As Peter crosses the bridge, police team below starts firing at him. But Frank saves his life by shooting at the light they are using to locate Peter. Meanwhile, SWAT team also reaches the hospital, meaning that Peter doesn't have much time before he is either killed or captured. He holds guards team leader hostage, thus gains leverage over them. This gives him access to the control room, and from there he puts the entire hospital in lockdown by closing all the doors. In the meantime, Samantha is informed that the kid is in critical need of a doctor. Hence she needs to reach in the old building as soon as possible. Frank gets her to the other building by hiding her from everyone. Peter, who is watching them on CCTV cameras, appreciates Frank for his efforts. But still, Peter doesn't allow them inside the building. However, Frank manages to convince him to let them in, assuring him to be on his side. Frank and Samantha go to see Max, while Peter initiates the next part of his plot. Peter marches the hostages onto the roof as a distraction, as he is sure that the captain and his team will be on the bridge joining the buildings. He has already laid a tank of propane with the bridge to kill them. Meanwhile, Frank figures out his plan and saves the captain and his team's lives by blasting the propane before they got on the bridge. The only people in the building now are Frank, Peter, Matthew, Samantha, and Max out of fear. The latter 3 have locked the room from inside. Peter and Frank meet each other outside, where Peter threatens to kill Frank. Listening this, Max promptly opens the door to save his father, but ends up being held at gunpoint. Peter now plays out the final part of his plan and uses the kid as a hostage. With the kid, he goes to the morgue, from which a path leads to underground tunnels. This was the Peter's absolute escape plan. He had the map of the tunnel he acquired from the internet. He makes a hole in the wall, apologizes to the kid, saying that he would have definitely helped him if he could without losing a chance to freedom. Leaving Max there, Peter then runs through the tunnel. Looking at the time being near to sunrise, he is sure to vanish in the rush hour traffic. As Frank comes to know about his plan, he follows him closely and ultimately finds him driving away in a blue car. He steals a police car and asks police control room for help by using the policeman's ID. After driving for some time, he finally notices Peter's car about to get on a bridge. Pretending to be captain, Frank calls bridge operator to block the bridge and gets Peter trapped. Just as they come face to face in the showdown, police captain with his team arrives in a helicopter. They fire at Peter, but Frank saves him by taking the bullet himself. Peter tries to run away, thus Frank shoots him just to injure him to prevent his escape, causing him fall into the sea. Frank also jumps behind him and using all his remaining strength, saves him. Afterwards, he is brought to the hospital, where the transplant finally completed and Max gets a new life. As he gains consciousness, finds a happy father waiting for him warmly. Peter is also alive and being treated in another more secure ward. He asks guard if the kid was okay. And then suddenly, the bed starts moving forward. As the guard realizes his gun was missing, Peter holds the gun to his head and inquires what kind of car he drives. And movie ends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Also, let us know in the comment if you want us to summarize any of your favorite movie. Thanks for watching. Take care.